Hello, and welcome to another episode of BitThink with me, Christina. This evening I'm going to be making a quick video about my thoughts on how a new investor or any investor coming into the Bitcoin space after the Bitcoin Cash fork should think about structuring their initial and baseline investment into Bitcoin. So in the first instance, it's worth acknowledging that the somewhat tribal, somewhat cultish divide between Bitcoin, original Bitcoin, Bitcoin Core, and Bitcoin Cash, or Bcash, or any of the names that are associated with either of the two chains. It's worth acknowledging that for a new person, a person coming into the space since, let's say, the fall last year and going forward, it can be a confusing and treacherous reality to come across as one decides in the first place to put money into Bitcoin and then the crypto space. So I wanted to make it clear what my personal position and then also what I think my sort of general intellectual position is with regards to what one should do when faced with the initial question of do I put money into Bitcoin only? Do I put money into Bitcoin Cash only? Do I put it into both? And my baseline approach is that as an investor and generally in life, it is better to look for ways in which you can do both and rather than find yourself trapped in a situation where your thinking or your investing choices are somehow structured around an either or. So in the first instance, I think that someone who is coming to convert an initial chunk of fiat in a long-term context, 3-5 years beyond time frame, and their mandate, their baseline investing mandate, is that the fiat that they put in should be worth the same amount of fiat adjusting for purchasing power at whatever point in the longer term future that the individual projects or will then assess. I think in that kind of a context, it is a wise choice to match the amount of Bitcoin that you put in numerically into your account with the amount of Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold. I think it's debatable about any of the other forks, whether or not there's really a value in this exercise. But I certainly think that if a person is going to go in and buy half a Bitcoin, they should at the outset buy half a Bitcoin Cash and half a Bitcoin Gold. And the reason why I think that this is so important has to do with thinking about what kind of position one might have been in had one owned Bitcoin from, say, the beginning, or certainly prior to the Bitcoin Cash fork. I think that if you think through, and especially if you take a good listen to some of the things that Daniel Krawitz is saying about the indifference, the power of the position of indifference that an investor can adopt with regards to the forks, it is really clear that in order to maximize your future choices, you should put yourself in the position of having the same number of choices available to you that somebody who was in Bitcoin in 2011 or 2012 or 2013 would be in today. So I did want to take a moment here to just talk a little bit more about what my meaning is when I talk about investments versus trading and as a third category, gambling. And I think it's important to make it clear that from my point of view, there is a lot of elision. There is a lot of moving swiftly from one to the other when people use the term long term. It would appear to me that oftentimes people are talking about trading, long term trading, when they talk about investing. And in fact, I think it's worthwhile, certainly for the clarity of thinking, let alone communicating, to be clear about the difference between an investment, which I see as effectively a defensive move, and trading, which I see as being an offensive move. And trading can be a mindset and a framework that operates over as long a time of period a period of time as an investment does. So simply because something is being thought of long term does not by definition make it an investment. And a trade does not have to, by definition, be short term. I think also it's important to make it clear that I am not against gambling at all. What I am against is calling gambling by a different name, primarily because it undermines a person's capacity to gamble well. Now, I am of the opinion that any person coming into the crypto space should establish a core holding in the Bitcoin chains. Whether or not one then expands one's holding into altcoins, tokens, and so on is the subject for another video. And certainly, it's important to differentiate between those entities that function as currencies and those entities that function as tokens or semi-shares or utility tokens, whatever the language ends up being with regards to how and what we call them. But I do think that it is important to maintain the capacity to allow for you to make a mistake. Daniel describes this as a mistake buffer. And I think that in the context of Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash, no matter how convinced one is at the outset with the initial investment in these times, with regards to which is the better, which is the true, which is the original, which is a lot of rhetorical, political, emotional stuff. But if you dig down further and you feel strongly about Lightning Network versus 2 megabyte block sizes, I think it's important to set yourself up so that you can be wrong. And you can be wrong about which you think might work better, and you can be wrong about the timing in which it becomes clear which is going to work better. And work better is a function of both the technology, the use, and the decisions made by the people who are investors. Investors being the people who are committed for the long term because they think that their money in whatever Bitcoin version it's in stands a strong chance of being worth the same when they come to look at it at some point in the future. As for then considering one's Bitcoin investments in terms of trades and thinking about which of the forks, those that exist already and those that will come into existence, which of those will provide an outsized rate of return, so a trading framework. Again, I think that it is clear at this time that it is not clear which of those is going to, which of the forks or which of even the other crypto entities is going to provide the most outsized returns. And again, it will depend on what time frame one looks at those numbers. So again, from the point of view of taking first and foremost a defensive position with regards to other places people can put their cash, and taking a defensive position with regards to yourself, perhaps being wrong, organizing the core holdings of your portfolio around equal numbers, numerical units of Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and other forks is a good place to start. If and when you then build into that portfolio and you have decided on an ongoing basis that you like one fork over the other, that's entirely up to you as an investor, you as a trader, or you as a gambler. It's really up to you, whatever your mind frame is. But I do think that from a strategic point of view, putting yourself in the position of being a longer term Bitcoin holder, e.g. somebody who came to the space before the forks, is infinitely preferable at the outset than trying to make the kind of bet that closes yourself off to the possibility that you're making the wrong bet, and so will end up in a less strong position than you would have been. This is not to say that as an individual investor, spreading their bets, so to speak, by establishing what is a pre-fork position. This is not to say that one can't also at the same time personally hold um, strong proclivities towards one fork over the other. It's entirely possible to hold a position that thinks that the existence of both is perhaps what's really necessary for success as a complex monetary project, perhaps in which one has one fork functioning as a store of value and another functioning as a means of payment. It's not really clear at this time, I don't think. And anybody who claims that they have the one, the true, and the only answer, I think is not convincing, and I'll just state it. I think that they're wrong. I think the very nature of this, I'm going to go so far as to say civilization that's coming into being through the actions of all kinds of sub-tribes all over the world, is um, an entity in such dynamic change and development that the best that anyone can do is to make present assessments, um, and and a little bit kind of casting runes into the future. Um, so that is my position with regards to whether or not, if you are coming to the space post fork, you should take a hard position um, on any of the forks, and that you should really try to open yourself to the possibility of having as big a mistake buffer as possible, um, and therefore increase the possibility that you're going to have an outsized success rate. So that's it from me on that particular subject. And I always forget to say this, but if you are enjoying the content that I'm making, do subscribe, do leave me a comment, even go so far as to smash a like and hit a notification bell. And I'll see you in the next video.